Hello, listeners, and welcome to a brand new episode. I'm so excited to be joined today by Melanie. Hi, Melanie.
Hi,
How are you?
very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Melanie and I obviously had our pre-chat, like everyone on the podcast knows now, we have our pre-chat and we get together and we pull out the interesting things that come up and we decide to speak about it as an episode. And I think for me, what I loved in your experience and your story, and if you want to start actually, maybe just give a brief introduction before I start going into your past. Do you want to just tell a little, like everyone, a little bit about you?
Yeah, happy to. So, I am the director of HR and People at Behavioral Science Research Institute, also known as BSRI. We're a local nonprofit here in Miami, Florida. I am 28. I'm Hispanic with a Cuban background, born and raised in Miami. I have an associate's in journalism and communications and a joint bachelor's in English and international relations. And I've been with BSRI now since June of 2020, peak pandemic.
Wow, what a time to move.
I know.
I mean, that's kind of what I wanted to speak to you about a little bit, or at least wanted you to share your experience and wisdom on, because you made a career shift, right? You moved from being a paralegal to HR, and even in the middle, you were an office manager. So, can you talk? I think this is going to be a really interesting episode for anyone who is thinking about a sideways career shift or anyone who is building out an HR team from scratch, because that's a little bit what you did. So can you talk a little bit about your experience, your decision to move from working in paralegal to looking for something more in the HR field, and then a little bit about how that ended up happening for you?
Of course, happy to. So before I fully dove into the world of HR and people, a good chunk of my career background was in law. So I was a Florida bar certified paralegal specializing in immigration and criminal defense with some experience in patent and trademark law. So you hear that and you automatically think, what is this girl doing in HR? When I was working in the smaller firms that were pretty much all startup firms, I was doing a bit of everything. Of course, paralegal work, which was handling all the firm's cases, but also training paralegals, creating SOPs, like infrastructure building, and doing some of the accounting for the firm. So a lot of the client relations and office management aspects. Since it was smaller teams and it was kind of like an all hands on deck approach to the firm, I was often responsible for a lot of the HR duties, like recruiting new talent to the firm, which then I'd later train, and building out what we essentially call the employee life cycle. Um, when I made the career shift from paralegal to office manager to fully HR, what really led to my decision making was the fact that I was working full time, going to school, and working full time at the law firms, which, if you're anybody who's doing that right now, you know that it's a handful and you know that it's a lot. And it was pretty draining to do both, in specifically in that field, because immigration and criminal defense are really heavy work. So you're dealing with people's lives, deportation, detention, the emotional component of it all, and the pressure was really hard. And it was rewarding, but it took a toll on me personally. And at that point in time in my career, I had decided that I was not going to go to law school. So I took a step back and I started thinking, what am I going to do next? I always had a passion to help people, and I had been given the feedback throughout my time in my career that I was really good with people. So really, I had a lot of passions and a lot of interests, like things I was doing inside and outside of work. So I really could go in any direction. And I really enjoyed the building of business and of business infrastructure and the HR people component of what I was doing at the firms. So I dove into that when going into the job market, like with no parameters and no limitations. What was meant to be was going to be. And I was willing to make the change regardless of what came my way. I actually resigned from the last law firm that I was working at without, like, I gave a really long notice, but I left without having another job lined up. And I know that that's scary, especially for someone going into the job market in today's day. But I was determined to put full work into finding the right fit for the next phase of my career. I think that that same week I started applying, I came across the SRI and the job opening, and the application process just went from there. Obviously, if you're a recruiter, if you are somebody who's in the hiring, or even if you're somebody in the job market, depending on what role you're applying for, the type of organization, application processes can be long. So I just took the risk and I was willing, and I like to call it kismet. It was a leap of faith and trusting my gut and trusting the leadership in the company. But all in all, like after the interview process and the application process, I obviously got offered the job. When I came on, BSRI was in a big growing phase. And with the now,
I'm gonna pause you there a little bit because I think there's a few big themes that like you've spoken about there that I don't
yeah,
want people to miss out on. Because I do think it's so interesting to like decide to make that shift, to acknowledge where you've already got applicable skills, even if you have been in a different industry and in a different job. Because I think for a lot of people listening, if you are someone thinking about a career shift or a sideways shift or a move into HR, more of a people role, like maybe you don't have the exact experience and you've not done that job title before, but what you just shared, Melanie, that I think is so interesting for people to think about is like, what are the skills underneath it that I do have? And where are the ways that I have practiced some of these skills, implementing some of these strategies, building some of these relationships, managing some of these processes that I can apply and look for. So I love that you mentioned that. And the other thing that I love that you mentioned is having this leap of faith and seeing this like kismet, seeing this opportunity. Now, I was actually speaking with someone today about the job market, and someone who like has a recruitment platform, and they were sharing about how it's like challenging time for people to find other jobs. So in no way are we telling people to quit your job and figure it out afterwards. But I do think it's really inspiring to hear you were so clear and confident in your decision. I think we spoke about this on our pre-chat. Like I think about it like dating. It's like saying like I'm gonna stay with the ex that I'm not happy with until I find someone else. But it's like you not finding that ex that you are staying with, like what's it keeping you from? What are you not available for? So I love that you made that decision and then became available for the job that is obviously where you still are today.
yeah, I mean, starting with that, I think it's really important. Obviously, everyone's financial situation is different. You know, a lot of us live paycheck to paycheck, especially in today's economy. So maybe that's not the ideal situation for just about everyone, like leaving a job and not knowing when your next paycheck is going to come. I was thankfully in the position where I could do that, and I didn't know how long that was going to be. I mean, it turned out that I literally fell from one paycheck to the next because I started working right away, and I was very lucky for that. But I do think even if you are gonna stay at a job, like what you call staying with your ex, until you find your new role, it's you have to keep your mind open to the possibilities, right? Maybe you do want to stay in that field, in that sector, in those type of roles if you're looking for something similar, but keeping the options open as to maybe location or like what the role looks like, or maybe having a more focused aspect of the role, or completely changing fields completely, like I did. Um, I think the leap of faith was more so because you in the time when you're applying for jobs, and I say this now to my team, and I say this to anybody who's coming on that we interview, right? Like this is as much you selling yourself as it is us selling the company that you potentially might want to work for, right? We mutually have to do the sell. You have to want to work here, we want to have to hire you. And I think you need to have a little bit of an air of confidence when you're applying for jobs. Like, yeah, I can do this. Maybe I haven't done it in this exact format or in this exact field or in this instance, but I can do it because I have history in doing it, or I'm confident in my skills that I can get there, right? I think a big part of applying is like having the you can do it attitude, or I can figure it out. A big thing that I got when I started working with BSRI from my CEO was that she's like, "You're not scared. Anytime I give you a task, even if you haven't done it before, you're like, okay, I'll figure it out." And that's not to say that every job that's applicable. You know, you're not going to go and start working in surgery and you're like, yeah, I'll figure it out. I've never done surgery before. But there's a lot of jobs where people's skills, interpersonal skills, customer relation skills are easily transferable from one field to the next. So what I learned in the law firms that I was working in with clients, directly with individuals and families, I could have applied here with our clients that are organizations. Customer service, if you have experience in customer service, a lot of jobs will open up for you in any field, because essentially what you need to have is the people aspect, being able to build trust, being able to um, communicate the needs, try and get the needs from the client. You know, it has to be a mutually reciprocal relationship, and being able to talk to people it just, to me, it seemed like that was something that I can do in any field. So when I was looking for work, I was open to any opportunity regardless of sector, and I was like, okay, whatever comes will come, and whatever's meant to be will be for me. And I wasn't scared. I mean, it is scary starting a new job. You're starting in a new place, especially in an HR role where you have to build a lot of trust. But I was willing to put in the work.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So how do you say you do build the trust?
So I think people are your biggest asset, right? That's the approach that I see when it comes to businesses. And building trust, because we were such a small team, I felt like it had to be one-on-one. So separate from coming in and kind of giving everyone my background and this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm here to do, you know, there's a lot of misconceptions around HR. You hear HR or like you refer to HR in movies. Oh, the HR department is here to get you in trouble. You know, you're here if you have a meeting with HR, it's because you're going to get fired. There's so many negative connotations around that word, human resources or HR in general. And I was trying to like break that stigma. I essentially came in with the mindset of I want to do here what I never got anywhere else. I want to be a industry game changer. I want to approach culture differently and I wanted to have a team that like fearlessly defended or contributed to the culture that I was trying to create. I made sure my team was like a part of the decision making process, which was part of building trust. And I tried to create individual relationships with every member. So starting from the CEO to any role in the organization. Granted, we were a very small team at the time that I joined, but finding common ground where are we similar, where do we differ, what can we learn from each other. And I think regardless of what role you're in, there's always something that you can learn from somebody else that you're working with. And that was a big part of coming on. So because when I came on, I was kind of a catch-all, a jill of all trades, if you will. I was doing a little bit of everything. So it was really important for me because I learned all aspects of the business. You obviously have to understand the work in order to understand how to help your people. So it was also kind of like knowing my why. Why was I here? What was my impact? How am I contributing to the org's mission and vision? And how am I living the company's values? So in that process of coming on and trying to build relationships, it was kind of easy to read, oh, this person really works well in this way. They really like to do this, or they really enjoy this aspect of their work. Okay, so how can I turn that into something that I'm impacting or I'm contributing to? And that was easily plug and play with the culture that we were trying to build around activities we were doing or even policies we were trying to start. For example, because I came in peak COVID, everyone was working remote. And we're in the field that we're in requires a lot of in person. So as we navigated everything around COVID and remote work, and we started coming back into the office, like most people in the field right now, they're like, "Oh, I loved working from home." So we didn't want to fully shift everyone into back 100%. So one of the things that we did was create a new remote work policy to have people 50-50. So 50% of the time at home, 50% of the time in the office. And then with the culture and team building, with the check-ins that I was doing regularly, quarterly, or informal, I was making them a part of the decision-making process. So I asked them, what activities do you think we should do? What have you guys done before I came on that you really enjoyed? Or what didn't you enjoy so we cannot do again? Because I know right now, like they always make jokes, and part of all the HR conferences I've been to, oh, culture is not just pizza parties and wearing jeans on Friday. And I 100% agree. But we do spend so much time with one another that it's important that we're doing things that we enjoy and it's not just all about work. We
Yeah.
have the motto here, we work really hard, we play really hard. So I wanted to make sure when we were playing hard that it was stuff that people enjoyed.
So yeah, and I couldn't agree with that more. It's so good to hear. And I love what you say about involving people in the decision-making process. And I can't help but think like, how do you think like having a previous experience or coming from like a different industry directly contributed to you? Because I'm just hearing lots of like innovative ways of doing things, lots of willingness to test, lots of willingness to listen, like not coming in and being like, I know everything, but really creating that collaboration. So like, how do you think your prior experience contributed to your like the creativity and the culture that you create as the HR member?
So in my previous experience, and this is not me bad mouthing whatsoever any law firms, but at least the law firms I was a part of, culture was not at the forefront of how the way the business was run. So going back to what I said of I often referred to what not to do or what I didn't get, that was kind of my leading way of leading with culture at the organization. So we didn't have culture. I wanted to make sure we had culture here. Not that there wasn't when I came in, there definitely was, but we wanted to build on it. We wanted to cultivate, we wanted to foster. So it was more so of, okay, we didn't really have honest feedback loops or HR check-ins and talking about how people are feeling, talking about workload, talking about flexibility and schedule. There, a lot of those conversations weren't had in the settings that I was in, and I think that they're really crucial because we spend so much of our time at work. It's absolutely necessary to make sure that there's a good balance of work life and personal life, and making sure that people's needs are met, right? There's a lot of another stigma is around calling your coworkers family. And yes, I 100% agree. Family is people that you don't have the option of choosing. It's the people that you get, but you also create families outside of that, whether it's through friendships, through colleagues. You're creating people that you choose to have in your life, and essentially you choose where you work. You don't, you have a choice of where you are and the people you're surrounding yourselves with. And I think the diversity that we have across our team and the mindsets, the inputs, the things that we learn from one another are crucial, and that's a big part of how we recruit. You know, we think culture fit first, skill fit second, just because skills you can teach, skills you can build. Culture fit is you either are or you aren't.
Mm,
And I think that based on the culture that we have at BSRI, for example, it was really important to the only way that I saw that growing or maintaining the culture that we wanted was to listen to people's needs, and that we did that in the one-on-ones and the check-ins, and it was around what we were creating based on the feedback that the team was giving us. So if things worked, okay, we continued. If things didn't, okay, how can we revisit? How can we take a step back, or how can we change this to make it more feasible?
yes. Um, Again, just hearing lots of like testing, communication, iteration, and just for anyone that's listening, that's like, we're part of a really huge organization and we can't listen to every single person this way. Like I was having a chat with a client today and they just submitted surveys about people and their time and productivity, what they're struggling with, and what we're going to go in and help them with. And I said to them, what, like, they're already receiving responses. And I said, this is the time for like casual coffee chat where you can bring up the survey and you can bring up like, and you can ask questions and you can have conversation around it. So maybe it can't be you speak to every person, but if you end up having 2 to 3 cups of tea or coffee a day and chatting to 2 people each time, you are going to get some varied responses and conversation and help people and help gather information where it might not be as thorough as what Melanie's sharing with every single person, but it's for sure like 100 times better than not doing anything because you can't speak to every single person.
I also think that something that's super important, speaking of people, is your leadership team, right? As much as you might want to do something in your organization, if you don't have leadership backing you, it's kind of hard to get the ball rolling, right? So it's crazy to me now that I have more of a decision-making role just because I'm part of the executive leadership team, and I'm super grateful for that. But I don't make decisions by myself. So we have a comparison that we like to call the members of the executive leadership team, and it's the CEO, the COO, and myself, and we call it the three-legged chair. So if one of the legs is missing, essentially you can't use the chair and you can't sit down. So we all rely heavily on each other, and all the decisions we make we bring to the table, and the three of us give our input. If
Yeah.
your leadership team, you know, is not buying your mission, your vision, or the direction you want to take the department or the organization, essentially you're kind of at a standstill. So part of being a culture fit or part of being in a role where you're trying to make those impacts, you essentially have to have your tribe, as you call it, on your side, making sure that you're all moving in the same direction and have following the same vision and mission. So it was really crucial and really important for them to see and to be a part of those conversations because I couldn't have done it without them. The three of us were always on the same page of the type of organization we wanted to continue growing and the environment we wanted to be a part of and the work that we wanted to do and the team we wanted to have doing it.
Yeah, and I think it's actually really powerful what you shared because I've had, many conversations with different people in HR and people in culture roles. And one of the things that does come up is the difference with having your HR, your people function with a seat at the table of the leadership team. We did an episode with Claire where she spoke more on this. But it really is like, I love what you shared about the three-leg analogy, and I can see how it's for sure going to set you guys up for success. Because it's like you can sit on that chair, but you're going to fall over. So how many
Yeah.
times, how many people, how many organizations are just like recovering from falling and falling and falling just because they don't have that consideration?
Yeah, well, the way I think about it is for a lot of the conversations about how we want to run the business and what the business needs to look like, it's definitely the three-legged chair. And for the things that we want to have the team's input and feedback and impact on, we think of it like a board game, right? So when you're looking at thinking of culture entirely in an organization, I compare it to a board game because there's a lot of rules and regulations when you see a board game that it says, oh, if you only have two players or if you only have three players, you can't play. The more players you have, the more successful the game is. And I think that that's the same thing with culture. Culture is not one person's responsibility. It's not one person's job, which often falls to HR or the people person at the organization. It's everyone coming together. Everyone contributes, everyone fosters, everyone maintains the culture. And the only way to do that is if everyone is involved. So, um, three-legged chair and your board game when absolutely necessary. And I think that that's, in my opinion and in my experience, that's a way to successfully run a business.
I think those are two really great ideas for people to think about, because I think our brain learns really well with analogies or examples like that. So like just remembering the three-legged chair, which for some of you might be like a five-legged chair, that's fine too. Or the board game. Can you explain a little bit more about the board game? I just want everyone to really take away from it.
Yeah. So obviously there's a lot of business decisions, like I said, that will involve your executive leadership team, and then decisions or even feedback that you want to consider the entire team for. Like I mentioned earlier, when talking about policies that worked and policies that didn't, or even activities that people liked and activities that people didn't, we were having everyone's input. So like every year, as because we're since we are a nonprofit, we work off of a annual budget. So as we go to determine the New Year's budget, and there's a specific line item for culture, I start thinking about like what activities are we going to do this year? You know, what ways are we going to incentivize our team, or what ways are we going to get together? What are we going to do outside of the office? One one voice is not enough, right? Like my idea of fun might not be somebody else's idea of fun, or what I enjoyed last year might not be what somebody else enjoyed last year. So it was crucial to get everyone to play the game or give the feedback, as I call it, and incorporate the things that they were telling me they really wanted to do, or the things that they really enjoyed, or even collecting feedback about policies. Like we just had a summer 4 days. That's what BSRI called it. A lot of companies call it summer Fridays because they had Fridays off. Didn't make sense for our organization to only take Fridays off because of our clients' needs. So we decided to call it summer 4 days and split our team across Mondays and Fridays.
Nice.
We did that for the summer, and in my opinion, it was really successful. And we were thinking of, it was like a pilot, so we were thinking of implementing it for summers going forward, or even making it permanent in the organization. And the only way that we were even going to consider it was getting the team's feedback. How did you feel about summer 4 days? Did you enjoy it? Did you feel like it was beneficial to your workload or to your work schedule? What would you do differently, or how would you change it, or what other policies, if we don't do this going forward, what other ways would you like to see this type of policy enacted in the organization? So we get the team's feedback, and that's crucial because one person's work style or one person's workload differs from the next, and in order for something to work for the entire organization, all the players have to be considered.
Yes, so good. So good. Thank you so much for sharing. If anybody listening wants to connect with Melanie, her link to her LinkedIn will be in the show notes if you've got any additional questions. I love that you've given listeners like something really practical to take away, both in terms of like making that career shift, but also in terms of like really listening and creating kind of some ripples and making some waves in terms of the industry and the ability to do so, and just seeing it as complementary. I think so often in society, I see this with a lot of my friends, it's like we're still celebrating the same career path and doing the same thing, but I think you've really given everyone a lot to think about in terms of the benefits of, you know, applying different skills and different experience. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you for having me. Yes, to all the listeners, take the leap. Trust your gut. You can do it.
You can do it. Perfect. And if you've listened to this podcast episode and enjoyed it, please do leave us a review. Or a brand new podcast. And if you are a guest or like would like to be a guest or would like to recommend a guest, the link to do so will also be in the show notes. We'll see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you.